Hi, I'm Jennifer Rubinovitz. I'm a grad student at Columbia. I work at a startup called Transmission in New York City. I'm your least favorite Hackathon hackers mod, Hack and Why mentor, and yeah, I'm excited about open data in general and how we can use it to benefit the hackathon community.
Hi, I'm Taylor Barnett. I'm now the former lead organizer after 2 years at HackTX. I'm graduating in May and also have like a strong interest in having more open, transparent data and also how it like helps our community grow.
Cool. I will take it from there. We're going to start by describing what open data is. So, this is what open data is. It's the idea that data should be freely available so everyone can use it. It sounds sort of like open source because it sort of is. It's open data. You can use it. You can play with it. There are hackathons devoted to building hacks with open data. Why open data? And if you're old enough to get this reference, we should hang out later. A little anecdote. I'm going to tell you a story about a party you weren't invited to 10 years ago. It was my bat mitzvah. I thought it was the best party ever. My parents told me it was the best party ever. My friends told me it was the best party ever. But 2 years later, I talked to family friends, and they were like, that was the most boring bat mitzvah I had ever been to. Why was this? Well, I was getting data from the wrong sources. Sort of like, same thing would happen at a hackathon I would throw. I would throw a hackathon. All the organizers thought it was awesome. Like, we managed to get the food on time, etc. But if you talk to someone outside of the in-group of the hackathon organizers, maybe they didn't think it was so awesome, and we weren't getting that feedback. You get feedback from the people you know. So open data is awesome because it's open to all the hackathon organizers. It's data you wouldn't necessarily look at otherwise. It's transparency, it's empowerment, it's sort of democratic. So how has open data been used in the past? Basically, open data started at the end of the Cold War, actually, because the East and the West had not been sharing data, and they decided to have some data that they'd share in these computers. There was no internet then. But it spiraled into this really cool thing. Like, the government has open data. There's a chief data officer in Philly. There's stop and frisk data. So if you are getting stop and frisked more, you can literally be like, yes, I actually am. Like, I have a valid point here. And there's science open data. People are sequencing the genome with games. And there's government and science open data. This is one of my favorite examples. It's clinicaltrials.gov, where you have to register your clinical trial to be published in certain journals. So even if your trial fails, the data is there. So whereas in most of science, you only publish positive stuff, even the negative trials are there, so you're not repeating old bad stuff, which is kind of what we want to do. I see a lot of hackathon data posts that are mainly about positives, whereas by having all the data, you can do negatives as well. And so we want to talk about establishing a standard. We know a lot of you collect your own data, but it is messy and not standardized, so you cannot compare with other hackathons or at all. So in general, open data standards are available and accessible, reusable, and available to everyone.
So I'm going to talk about some examples that what has open hackathon data been so far. So first, as we touched earlier, MLH did a survey. They've done 2 now, and it is very comprehensive, but it's not for specific events, and it's for the whole community. Also, you'll notice the number of people filling out the survey is about equivalent to the number of people that attended MHacks and Penn Apps on one weekend. So imagine if we multiplied that times all the events that we have over the whole season. So one of the things is we do find out a lot of interesting information from the survey that maybe you won't do on an individual event basis, but we see that as one part of the critical component. So another example of doing something different, HackMIT did a lottery, and in the result, they saw how many, the demographics data that they got back from that. So that's a perfect example of doing something different and then coming back and evaluating how did that affect our event. Another one is in the spring, BitCamp definitely pushed for a different type of marketing campaign. It was definitely not the same stale marketing campaign that a lot of us had kind of been doing, and it kind of gave something a fresh idea, and they didn't call it a hackathon and all different things. Well, one of the things they realized, they had 18% female attendees, which in the spring of 2014 is actually quite high from what we know, because a lot of it isn't released. And they also, one of the cool things that they also kept was how many hacks were actually submitted to challenge posts versus how many were actually there, and also shows what kind of rates of students are actually going through or they're quitting, or and help us to look at why some of these things are happening. So one of the things that we really we had kind of collected data. It was either optional or it was badly done, different things. So this year, one of the things that we looked at was how many, out of all the first-time hackers, how many of them were coming from different, what years in school. So normally you think you're freshman, you're sophomore, they're new to college, there's a good chance they're going to be first-time hackers. But actually, we found that a lot of them, we had them from across the board. Even seniors who were an event that's been around for 3 years, you'd think, oh, they would have already come at least once. So definitely, we reached out to new groups, and we were able to see that in some of the data that we collected with all our attendees. So far, hackathon data has been really messy. It's not clean. It's missing information. It's hard to decipher. It's not open. We can't connect with another hackathon and compare our data sets because we're not on the same standard. We have different priorities. And so a lot of this is about breaking down what as a community do we need to do to help our data, and also how to help collect it in the right ways. So what can it be? So basically, open hackathon data can be very comprehensive, or it could not, but that's up to you. A lot of it, though, is we're wanting to establish a baseline so that we have a way to discuss between organizers our different events. So sometimes you'll have an event that has a really high percentage in a certain area and another that has lower. And so the critical thing is us actually having the conversation surrounding our data and realizing that maybe this hackathon did really great job at this, and we didn't do so great job. But with learning from them, we can do just as great job the next time. So what kind of problems can this solve? Which we've touched on, but let's give some actual use cases. So there's a slide missing, but one of the things is open hackathon data can help organizers be empowered to make data-driven decisions. So we're not blindly looking in and saying, okay, we're going to do this because we think it might work. A lot, Swift touched on at the very beginning yesterday, was that we can't be blindly going into some of our diversity efforts. We need to actually be tracking and seeing what are we doing well and what are we doing bad. So a perfect example of that is watching timestamps on your registration submissions in relation to different marketing campaigns and outreach efforts that y'all have, to see how successful are you actually with these ideas that you're coming up with, and seeing is it actually turning into registrations. Another perfect example of that is looking at attendees versus people who are registered. So, some of us have application-based. HackTX is first come, first serve because we don't want to make application decisions. So, and we're kind of in a unique, we have the option to do that because we're in a unique space of being in Texas. But one thing we found was looking at people who registered and then if they showed up, and maybe why did they not show up. And so it's really great comparing your data from those different data sets instead of just looking at who had registered or who just was showing up. So it's important to be collecting this data at multiple points in the process. So like I touched on earlier with the marketing outreach, it's really, really critical that, yeah, you think it was really helpful to go talk to this organization that was maybe not a normal attendee group, but with looking at the data that comes back like the next week after that, you can see, you know, maybe I approached them wrong. Did I not answer their questions in a way that it was more understanding to them? Did I scare them away by throwing the word hack out there all these times? Like, what are the different things that can help us change the way we do outreach? So heading back to Jen.
Cool. Okay, so how can we allow you, hackathon organizers, to contribute your data to this open hackathon data initiative? So our plan is to standardize some data points to start with, but we're definitely looking for feedback, like year in school, major, university, gender identity, first hackathon, dietary needs, registration timestamp. Also, we're interested in talking to Challenge Post about data sources they might be able to contribute, because there's a big difference between someone who goes to the hackathon, does not put up a demo, someone who puts up a demo but doesn't show up to their table, and someone who wins a hackathon. Those are all really interesting data points as well. So we'd like to standardize that submission. This is a tweet that Taylor likes, and I also like, but she should explain it.
Basically, so, I mean, it's great that you're collecting data, but if it's like, oh, you're going to have to email me and, you know, 2 weeks after the event, and I'll give you like a clean spreadsheet of removed of personal identification and all the information, which you definitely should be doing if you are going to be releasing your data. And so the thing is, we want like a centralized, we want to make it easy. Like, I can just tell you, go here and you can find the data. Like, it's not complicated. Let's like remove barriers to entry of the data.
Right. So like Taylor and I had a kind of experiment doing this, because Taylor was trying to send me her data, and she had to clean it, and then she had to give everyone unique identifiers, and then I had to convert it to a CSV so I could play with it. So like we already see all these boundaries that can be solved with packages like R and Python pandas and all these sort of libraries, but also going into it knowing what you want to collect. Can I open this? So we have this repo. So right now, it is coming soon, but I have like the CSV template in there. It is slightly off. But the idea is that if you watch the repo, like a listserv, you'll be subscribed to when we post information on it, and then you can get involved in this initiative. Just suggestions in general. Anonymize everyone, stick to the schema, and learn how to clean data. And then discussion?
Yeah, so a lot of this is, so this is something that we've been working on. We've talked to different organizers about this, but a lot of this is also a community effort. We really want the community to help us with this and also get feedback, why you might want to do this, why you might not. We've had some already conversations this weekend based on doing registration with data about opt-in versus opt-out. We've really found like a critical one would be like a gender identity. If you have like 3 options, maybe having your other as fill in the blank. So if someone does prefer not to say to give data, we think that's really critical. And so we would love to get some feedback and like open up the conversation. You want to start, if anyone, and we'll repeat. Or do you want to? Yeah.
Do you think that that's, like, don't you think it's kind of unfair to be like, you know, we have Barnett across the street, which is an all-female school, and it's very easy for us to advertise there, so, like, the ratio that we should be shooting for should be higher female to male, as opposed to, like, 50-50, because we have, like 66% female in Columbia University versus, like, other groups. So, like, don't you think that people can sort of hide behind data?
Yeah, so one of the things is that, like, just to sum up, basically we need to keep in context the schools that we're bringing in attendees from. And a lot of that is also, a perfect example is University of Texas Computer Science has never released public demographics data since 2011. I have to use Wayback Machine just to see on the website. And so like a lot of schools do and don't. So that's another thing. Like we got to keep this in context of our universities. And you know, definitely there's ways that we could maybe try to kind of connect like different sizes of universities with each other, different demographic makeups, location, different things like that. I mean, that's definitely very critical. You can't just like across the board just start like running really straight numbers that's just like, oh, you have to be at this percentage. I mean, a lot of it is up to the organizers to still keep their own event in context of like the whole community in the back of their head when they're comparing things. Or,
how can we encourage hackathons with maybe embarrassing numbers to share them? You know, yeah, our 1% female population is not going to get good reception, so we're not going to share it.
yeah. Yeah, so some of the question, how can we, as he said, embarrass hackathons with lower percentages in certain areas in the makeup of their attendees? I mean, a lot of it is, if we want to grow the community, we're going to have to like be a little bit more open with each other and be honest. Like a lot of, like some people are just embarrassed to even share their data because they know it's bad. But the thing is, we can learn from each other and like recognize, yes, we screwed up in a certain area, and that, you know, how can we do this better? Now, how can we, I don't want to like point out people by like, hey, you sucked at this. Like, I don't want to do that. But at the same time, like,
I think it's emphasizing competing against yourself to start, because hackathons happen, you know, every year, every semester, and if you have a really bad number one semester and it's really great the next semester, I think it'll look better than publishing nothing at all.
Yeah, progress looks really good. Like people reward progress. Yeah. I'm totally like in agreement. Like the data isn't everything, you know. But a lot of like we started last year talking about inclusive, like hackathons in general. But like we need a way to start evaluating a little bit better and like keeping each other accountable for actually like moving, like progressing, because you know it might go stale. Like efforts, like you know we need to start trying new things. We can't keep on doing the same thing over and over.
I think as far as like keeping that data amongst organizers, I don't think it's going to stay private. Two, if your hackathon is really bad for a group of people, they're probably going to know whether you release that data or not. They're going to hear about it.
We see it, like, you know, we see these conversations all the time in the Facebook groups and stuff. Like, I mean, it's a known thing. And most of the time, when you look around, like, I mean, I've had situations where I've been to events where I've looked around the room and I can't find a very diverse set of people. The data reflects that too. I mean, and so it's not like a secret. And I mean, I'll talk about that. Like, I mean, and other people will too. So, yeah. Oh, Richard, he's been waiting.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that like on Challenge Post, all the data for the projects and the submissions is available as a CSV download with one click. And we also, for the attendees, we don't have a lot of demographic information, but both downloads are available with all PII score private information. They're available scrub. But any other data that you want to talk about that we might be able to provide, totally up to chat about that.
Yeah, because we're really interested in the number of, like the number that aren't even making it onto challenge posts in the first time. Like, you know, you have someone who just like quits in the middle because maybe there was a reason why. We need to like get down to that reason. Yeah.
Well, you haven't asked a question.
Yeah. So how do you get your hackers to fill out a survey or get qualitative information, and how do you deal with sampling bias that might come from
Yeah, so the point is that it's a part of your registration. They can opt out if they don't feel comfortable, or if they, you know, for some have whatever reason why they wouldn't want to give that information. But when we were talking about the few data points, a lot of these are things were already a part of our registrations. It's not very many. And, you know, you already usually have timestamps. You're usually asking majors. You want to know what school they go to. I mean, these are very like things that you're not really having to put much forth, a lot more effort. So a lot of the important things is it's not a survey. So like with the Major League Hacking survey, that's very much a survey, and you can look at the number of responses from that. And there's really like interesting things in that data, but it's not specific to events, and yeah.
Dan?
Like, I guess at DevFest we were struggling with putting this stuff in our registration because honestly it's pretty intimidating. Like, if someone asked me like, why do you care my race? I would have a hard time answering that, right? Because like, especially like when you're signing up and you're not like totally familiar with hackathons, you don't know that like this is like the biggest problem that we deal with. It's not like logistics, it's this, right? Like, so like we know that we need it to be like, we need to know how we're doing, but like when someone's filling out the form and you can't like communicate that effectively to them, like how can we do that better? Because like I don't know how to put something like what's your name and year on the, or like what's your name and email on the same level as like what's your race?
I mean, are you doing it as an optional field?
Yeah, it's optional.
I mean, I feel like optional fields, and also if we branded this as something like a hacker census, it could be cool, because censuses are, in politics, how people are represented. Like, for instance, transgender people are not represented in the US Census. So politicians don't know how to play their politics for transgender people, and that's crazy. So I think it might be that we need to brand it a certain way and explain why we're doing it.
One more question. Okay. Okay.